What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be going through my top 50 overall player rankings for the 2024 fantasy football season. I just updated my running back and wide receiver videos, so check those out if you guys are interested. But today we're putting all the positions together: running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, seeing how they kind of fit together in my player rankings. Also going to be splitting these players up into tiers. Would love to know your guys' thoughts on these players. Who do you think is too high? Who do you think is too low? Let me know your reasoning down below. I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But let's dive right into Tier 1. And Tier 1's only actually going to have one player here, and it's Christian McCaffrey. At this point in the offseason, he is my clear-cut 101. Pretty much every scoring setting, Christian McCaffrey is going to be my selection with the number one pick. Overall, the running back position just has much less depth than wide receiver, and getting a running back who's pretty much a lock to finish as like a top 2 running back when healthy, in my opinion, is just too good to pass up here. So CMC, my only Tier 1 player this season. Now shifting into Tier 2, we're going to start off with, this first chunk of 5. CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson. I think these guys are pretty close together. I think you could, swap these guys in different orders. You have elite wide receivers, elite running backs, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, both coming off of 23 plus PPR point per game seasons. I did move up Breece Hall one spot from my last video, just slightly above Jamar Chase. Chase hasn't necessarily proven that nuclear ceiling yet. Breece Hall performed insanely well coming off a torn ACL. Once he was cleared for a full workload, he averaged over 19 PPR points per game. Did that while also playing on a very bad offense. I think Breece Hall definitely has RB1 overall upside. Then a guy like Bijan Robinson didn't necessarily have a great fantasy season as a rookie, but everything is shifting towards him being significantly better here in 2024. Arthur Smith is gone. Looks like they want to use him as a workhorse. Kirk Cousins coming in to play quarterback. This is a very, very strong tier of like early round 1 picks to like mid round 1 options. Then the 2 other players I have in this tier are Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, both wide receivers. I think they're slightly behind the earlier 3 wide receivers I have within this tier, but I also think they're pretty firmly ahead of the tier 3 guys. So both players who are coming off really impressive seasons. For Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is built on his fantasy production year after year, pretty much jumped up like around 3 points per game from year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to year 3. So definitely someone who I'd like as a first round pick. And then for Justin Jefferson, obviously a very elite talent. The only thing that concerns me here is the offensive situation. All the guys ahead of him have pretty set offenses, quarterback play that we think is at least fairly reliable. For Justin Jefferson, we don't know if it's going to be Sam Darnold, if it's going to be JJ McCarthy. This team probably isn't going to be a top tier offense this season, so I just think his ceiling is a little bit questionable in this Vikings offense, but still someone who I have here in tier 2. Still definitely like him for fantasy. Now shifting into tier 3, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers. We have Jahmyr Gibbs, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, and Jonathan Taylor. This is like back end round 1, very start of round 2. And I truly do believe that Jahmyr Gibbs has 20 plus PPR point per game upside. I know he's not going to be a workhorse, but I think he can up his receiving production this year. He's going to have touchdown upside, even in a committee with David Montgomery. And then we know his efficiency is going to be there on this Lions offense. Then this wide receiver grouping of Puka, Garrett Wilson, and A.J. Brown, they're all so close together to me. I think you can definitely make cases for all 3 of these dudes kind of like leading this wide receiver grouping. For Puka, an insane rookie season, reason to believe he can build on it heading into year 2. For Garrett Wilson, super impressive given the offensive situation he was in his first 2 seasons. Now hopefully has Aaron Rodgers for the full season. Talent-wise, I think he definitely has like mid-tier wide receiver 1 upside, maybe even higher if Aaron Rodgers looks great. And then for A.J. Brown, he hasn't necessarily flashed like that 18 plus point per game upside, but he's very consistently been in like that 17 point per game area. If you add the volume he had last year to some of the efficiency he's had in previous seasons, I definitely think he could, break that 18 number, which is something that he has not been able to do yet. And then the final guy in this tier, Jonathan Taylor, I think kind of similar to Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think he has the same ceiling of the 3 running backs, ranked in the earlier tiers. But I still think he could be a 20 plus point per game guy. You have Anthony Richardson at quarterback. I think the rushing efficiency is going to be great. Never going to be a super high volume pass catcher, but I think he can give you a decent amount of passing work like we saw in his 2021 season. So I think the rushing production is going to be there. You just hope that Richardson doesn't vulture a ton of touchdowns. Now, tier 4, definitely a little bit of a larger tier here. We're going to start off with a wide receiver. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., and I do think within this tier, the wide receiver position is a little bit sketchy. Not saying that there aren't any great options here, that these guys aren't going to pan out, but I don't think there's a ton of consensus, from one fantasy player to another, from one platform to another, which means you never really feel great about drafting like wide receiver in this like early second round area, because I could take a Marvin Harrison Jr. here. This is where I have him valued, but someone else may not even take him like in the first, 2 rounds. So there's just going to be a lot of uncertainty with where these wide receivers are going off the board, but I do think it's fair to have Marvin Harrison Jr. here. And then I actually go pretty running back heavy with Devon Achane, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams. I've kind of progressively just continued to move these running backs up, and it just comes down to the fact that I think these round 2 wide receivers, round 3 wide receivers, I think they're pretty flat. And since we don't have that consensus, I would rather just push up these running backs because I think I can get a decent value at wide receiver, round 3, early round 4 at like that 3-4 turn area. So that's why I like those running backs. Maybe they're not competing with CMC, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, but Achane, 17 plus points per game as a rookie. Think he should improve on his role here in 2024. Saquon in a much better situation here with the Eagles. And then Kyren Williams was the running back 2 in points per game last year. Maybe not in as great of a spot with Blake Corum coming in, but someone who I still expect to lead his backfield. Then we go back to wide receiver with Drake London, Chris Olave, Nico Collins, Deebo Samuel. Drake London, out of this tier of wide receivers, some of them aren't in great situations. Others have a ton of target competition. Drake London, in my opinion, has proven he's talented. He's in a much better situation with Kirk Cousins coming in, and he doesn't have a ton of target competition. That's why I have him here kind of towards the top of this grouping of wide receivers. For Olave, not the best offensive situation, but definitely has proven the talent so far. Not a ton of competition. Nico Collins, great quarterback play. Has that target competition with Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, but still just an offense I'm willing to buy into here. And then for Deebo, he definitely moved up a little bit with the Brandon Ayuk trade request. Not that I think it's like a guarantee that Ayuk's going to get traded or hold out, but I just think that uncertainty does boost him up a little bit. Then we go back-to-back running backs, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne. Also bumped these guys up a little bit. I think Derrick Henry in this Ravens offense, it's a pretty perfect fit. There's obviously concerns, age, injury risk, just looking at his career workload. But if he can stay healthy, he's going to be very efficient. He's going to have a lot of touchdown upside on this Ravens offense. And then for Travis Etienne, someone who I think is being slept on a little bit for fantasy this year. I believe he was a mid-tier running back one last year. The volume was there, the efficiency wasn't great, but I am kind of expecting a bounce back here for this Jaguars offense. So I think Travis Etienne, if he can take the volume from last year with the efficiency he saw in his first full season, I think he definitely has high-end running back one upside. And then wrapping up this tier with Davante Adams, commanded volume at a really high level last year, didn't necessarily translate to great fantasy production. It kind of seems like we're in this crossroads season where either he proves that last year was kind of fluky, it was weird that he didn't have wide receiver one production, or maybe we're starting to witness the fall off of him. You have Brock Bowers coming in, increased target competition. So I do think this is an interesting spot for Davante Adams this season. Now shifting into tier 5, we're going to go Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Tank Dell, Malik Neighbors, Mike Evans, and then Isaiah Pacheco. I view all these wide receivers as solid fantasy wide receiver 2s who could potentially break into the top 12. Jalen Waddle, we know he's going to give you that like fringe wide receiver 1 production in a boom year if he's healthy. Also has that built-in upside if Tyreek Hill were to go down. For DJ Moore, in a pretty crowded wide receiver room, but last year he proved he could be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. I think Caleb Williams is going to be playing quarterback at a much higher level than Justin Fields, so maybe the target competition is too much, but I do expect him to be the wide receiver 1 on a much improved offense. Brandon Ayuk, kind of talked about that uncertainty he's thrown in here. I don't think the 49ers are like a great situation for him, but I mean, we've seen him give you solid wide receiver 2 production. A trade isn't necessarily always better. He could go to a poor landing spot, thinking like Commanders, maybe the Patriots if they don't have their stuff together here. So Ayuk, I think, is fine here in tier 5. Tank Dell, someone who I'm definitely going to be higher on the consensus. When he was healthy on the field last year with Nico Collins, the dude was balling out. I'm more willing to buy into Tank Dell compared to Stephon Diggs, who I'm just not quite as high on. And then Malik Neighbors, not a great landing spot, super talented prospect, willing to take a swing. Mike Evans, definitely going to be a little bit lower than consensus. This is just a spot where Chris Godwin was misutilized last year. This isn't going to be the same caliber of offense they had with Tom Brady, with the insane passing volume, even honestly Jameis Winston. Not that the quarterback play was super high level, but just the amount of opportunities that were there, the touchdowns, the yardage. And so if Chris Godwin's back in the slot getting more work, that's obviously going to hurt Mike Evans at this point. And then for Isaiah Pacheco, someone who I think is kind of being thrown in farther back at the running back position. And he's not the flashiest just in terms of his profile, right? He's not an early round pick. He was a day 3 guy, but he's been given the opportunity to be this Chiefs running back 1, and he's produced. They haven't brought in a ton of competition for him. I mean, pretty much zero competition. So he's pretty lined up here to be the clear running back 1 on what should be one of, probably the top 3 offenses in the NFL. Has a little bit of receiving upside. We know the touchdowns are going to be there. Totally fine taking Pacheco in this tier 5 area. Continuing on with tier 5, we have the first quarterbacks and tight ends in my rankings. We're going to go Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce. I'm probably a little bit lower on all 4 of these guys than consensus, and I think it just comes down to how I'm viewing the position, maybe a little bit differently from others this season. So starting off with Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. The quarterback position is just so unbelievably deep that I'm fine taking Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, like late round 3. If they're falling to the 4th round, I'm in on them. They've proven high ceilings at the quarterback position. Josh Allen, even if the weapons are different, still very confident in him. We know he has the rushing upside. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. Great weapons. I think this offense should be more competent this season. But we're also in a spot here where I'm not trying to take them 2-3 turn area, because there's just going to be so much value later on in the draft. You can still find values with elite options like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson. In some of the later rounds, you're getting into like your Kyler Murrays. CJ Stroud's probably not going to be there, but I think Kyler's a great value. And then if you just completely punt the quarterback position, you can snag 2 guys like Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels, Matthew Stafford, you're like Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, all of those guys, Trevor Lawrence, Herbert. There are just so many potential options, which is why I'm not trying to force anything at quarterback. And then for the tight ends, I definitely think the tight end position is not as deep at quarterback. You can get put in a tough spot at the tight end position if you don't snag one. But it just comes to how I view Laporta and Kelce in comparison to guys like Mark Andrews and Trey McBride. On most platforms, you have McBride and Andrews going like at least a round behind Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce, and I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. We look at all 4 of these guys' production last year. They were all very, very close together. When McBride was a starter, he actually would have been the tight end 1 in points per game. Mark Andrews, before his injury, would have been tied as the tight end 1 in points per game. Kelce might be slowing down a little bit. Laporta, obviously a great rookie season, but was fairly touchdown dependent. Is that number going to stick? So I just think these guys are very closely clumped together, which is why I'm not willing to take them early 3rd when I can get McBride, Andrews like mid 4th, maybe even later on some platforms. So those are my thoughts on those quarterbacks and tight ends. Now shifting into tier 6, starting off with these 4 wide receivers, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith. I think these guys are all back-end wide receiver 2s. A pretty solid mix here of players in very different situations. Pittman, wide receiver 1. Maybe the current offense he's on isn't like the best fit for him with Richardson at quarterback. Some competition there. For DK Metcalf, he has the competition with JSN Lockett, also a new offensive coordinator or a new head coach also. So how's this offense going to look? Cooper Kupp definitely seems like he's on the decline. Injuries, I think, limited him last year, but you have Puka Nacua there. How much of the 2021-2022 Cooper Kupp is still in there? And then Devonta Smith, pretty clear wide receiver 2 on his team, but should be giving you wide receiver 2 fantasy production, and then also has that wide receiver 1 upside if A.J. Brown were to go down. Just talked about these tight ends, also in tier 6, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, my tight end 3, tight end 4. I truly do believe that both of these guys have the potential to finish as the tight end 1, which is why I'm much more willing to buy them at their current price compared to Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce. Now shifting into tier 7, we've got some running backs, wide receivers, a couple of quarterbacks. Start off here with Lamar Jackson. He's my quarterback 3, coming off an MVP season. We know he has a very, very high fantasy ceiling. We saw that in his first MVP year. Then I have Josh Jacobs, and I've started to slowly kind of move Josh Jacobs farther and farther down my rankings. I don't know if this is going to be the lowest I have him. I would not be shocked if he ends up being much closer to James Cook, Joe Mixon in my next rankings video. I just think he's a lot closer to that tier. And we're kind of holding on to his 2022 season where he was so amazing. But last year he was rough. This is a Packers team that does not have to be committed to him long term. This is also a Packers team led by LaFleur, who's been willing to use a running back by committee. Not even willing, like truly wants to use a running back by committee. You have A.J. Dillon, Marshawn Lloyd coming in. I think his situation is just a little bit less secure than maybe, people are thinking here. Then I've got like my high-end wide receiver threes, Diggs, Higgins, Flowers, Pickens. Diggs, very crowded wide receiver room, not overly high on him. T. Higgins, kind of like that Devonta Smith with maybe a little bit more injury risk just in terms of his situation, right? Clear wide receiver 2 for the Bengals, has upside if Jamar Chase were to go down, but he's kind of struggled to stay healthy. Same thing with Joe Burrow. And then for Zay Flowers, George Pickens, both guys who I think could take leaps here and, be wide receiver 2s, maybe even have wide receiver 1 upsides this year if they do take those leaps. Then I have 2 high-end running back 2s with James Cook and Joe Mixon. Guys I'd be fine taking, in round 4. James Cook, not going to have the workhorse role, but on a very good offense, should be involved as a pass catcher, should be efficient as a runner. Joe Mixon, definitely should be the workhorse, maybe won't be the most efficient option, but a workhorse running back on an offense that should be taking another step forward here in 2024. Definitely someone who's interesting. And then wrap it up here with Patrick Mahomes. You could definitely make an argument that Patrick Mahomes should be ranked higher. It kind of once again comes down to just how stacked the quarterback position is, but I do think we're going to see him bounce back after a somewhat uncharacteristic, poor fantasy season in 2023. He has the weapons. Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce still there. I definitely think this offense is going to be a top-tier unit once again. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 50 overall player rankings. Let me know your thoughts. Who should I be moving up? Who should I be dropping? Would love to hear it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.